for a dungeon actually generates differently depending on which side of the world you're on. Here I'm on the left side of the world, and you can see that this dungeon is kind of a zigzag on the way down. Whereas on the right side of the world, it's almost a straight line. You can see here that it's basically going directly down and to the right. And this matters a lot for whether or not I get a dungeon guardian to spawn. I got one to spawn there, which is kind of unlucky, but most of the times I actually won't. And the reason why is because the way the game tries to spawn an enemy is by selecting a random tile around you and then scanning downwards until it finds a solid block. So let's say it found this tile and then scan downwards until it found this platform. What it would then do is check if this is a valid spawning tile by checking if there's anything that obstructs it within these 6 blocks here, this 2x3 rectangle. So what this means is that if I have a staircase going up and to the left, then none of these tiles are valid spawning tiles because here you'd have this platform obstructing the spawn. But if I had a staircase going up and to the right, then mobs would be able to spawn on every single one of these tiles because there's nothing that obstructs this 2x3 area. Now with a staircase like this, it's very hard for a dungeon guardian to spawn because very few of these tiles are valid spawning tiles. We can use the spawning criteria to box in the mechanics such that nothing can spawn directly on top of her while we're farming bones. When the mechanic is bound, she's actually only 2 tiles tall, so we can box her in with this 4x4 or 2x2 or however you want to look at it box, where every single tile inside of this box is not a valid spawning tile. If we talk to her, then she'll be 3 tiles tall, and these tiles over here, these 3 tiles, would actually be valid spawning tiles because they would drop down to this tile over here and nothing in this range is obstructing the spawn. Another hint that we can use to locate floating islands are these out of place puddles. You can see that there's really no reason for there to be a puddle of water here except for spillover during world generation from floating islands. So there's a floating island right over here. Water probably spilled down here and went down the slope to collect over here. There's a similar puddle over on the left here in the ice biome. There's no reason for water to be here except for having fallen here from above. Sometimes you'll want to drain a body of liquid. For example, I want to drain this spike pit so that mobs can spawn in here. And it's pretty easy to do this with a bucket of a separate liquid and a coin. So this is a method Patrick2569 came up with to drain spike pits. You just block swap these blocks and then mine the spikes at the bottom so that we have empty space here. And then put some coins here, and you can put lava or honey here. And then when you expose the water to it, it'll start draining because no honey box can form on top of the coins. You can do the same thing with the ocean, or you could even drain like lava with honey and get fixed boy if you want to have an easier time creating an arena. If you're shimmering items too quickly, you may end up having an item shimmer twice. And this will happen if you use something with an animation, for example, eating or throwing while the item is getting pulled in towards you. So if you watch my runs, a lot of the times while I'm shimmering ores, I'll move in mechanic or do something else that doesn't have an animation instead of throwing more items because I don't want to risk changing this orichalcum into palladium and not being able to craft an anvil. 3 of the 5 fish round weapons actually have the ability to shoot through walls, although probably not intentionally. The Flare-On and the Razorblade Typhoon can shoot their projectiles through walls if you're pressed right up against it. And the Tsunami has something kind of similar, but it's a lot more precise, where in this specific formation, where you have a ceiling 1 tile above you, you're able to shoot all 5 of your arrows through a wall, or through the ceiling. And this is useful for Retinazer's second phase, where he alternates from being above and to your left. And because you'd only be able to shoot 1 arrow through the side, it's actually better to shoot straight up and wait for the arrows to fall back on top of him when he comes back to the top than to shoot up and then left and up and left. However, you can kind of just disregard everything I said because we're actually allowing block clipping in no major abuses. So to set this up, you kind of just place a platform somewhere, hook into the platform, and then place a block on yourself using block swap. And now Retinazer doesn't see me at all, but I have unconditional line of sight against Retinazer, and I can shoot all of my arrows in any direction. You You can invalidate some part of every single pillar using this. For example, at Vortex Pillar, you can see that these Storm Divers, these Alien Queens, none of them are going for me. And the only thing I need to watch out for is this portal that spawns above me. The way this portal works is it scans directly above the player until it finds a solid block or until it gets far enough. And if it's high enough up, or if it hits a solid block, it'll spawn the portal there. And it will either spawn these hornets or lightning, depending on how many alien queens are alive. But as long as I put a platform above me, not a solid block, and then solid blocks for the aliens to land on, then I'll be fine for Vortex Pillar. At the Stardust Pillar, you can isolate the Stardust cells, and they move really slowly if you're clipped inside of a block. If they can see you, they'll begin moving much more quickly. For the Solar and Nebula Pillars, they really revolve around isolating spawns, so building a box in the air with no floating islands or living trees nearby, so that the only place a mob can spawn is within this box. If I set up a block clip over here for Nebula Pillar, the only things that are really going to go for me are these Nebula Floaters. The Brain Sucklers can trickle up here, but very slowly, so they're not much an issue. The Projectors won't shoot at me since they can't technically see me. And then the Evolution Beasts will only shoot at players that are within like 30 or so blocks. So here they wouldn't fire their orb at me. If you don't want to use block clipping or you don't want to deal with the Nebula Floaters, there's an alternate hexagonal, I don't really know how to say it, a different setup to achieve this. So I'm fully zoomed out here and I'll place an ice block at the edge of my range using the ice rod. This ice block is positioned such that if I'm below it, nothing spawns, but if I go above it, mobs are going to start spawning. I want to build everything while being in this safe area where nothing's going to spawn, so I'll use minecart tracks, which have +5 building range. I can put one solid block here, one rail here, and one solid block here, and then 6 rails above it. And then at this midpoint rail, I'll place a rail and a block to each side of it. And I can get inside this box safely by just mounting to this bottom rail. I'll end up in a minecart up here above the rail. And then I can dismount and then move to the right and then hook up and left to get to the center rail. Then the only thing I need to do to complete it is place these wood blocks here so that it's symmetrical. Like this. And this is mostly safe. At some angles, like directly above or directly below, the Nebula Floaters will still go after me. One thing I can do to make it slightly less likely that they'll go after me from the top is placing a block here and then hammering the block below it. I can speed up time here just to showcase it, and I'll probably turn down the volume as well. But I'll give a quick rundown of why this works. Basically, there are two types of line of sight. There's line of sight type A and line of sight type B. Line of sight type A is kind of just a beam towards the player from the enemy. And if this beam is blocked by any solid block, then the enemy doesn't have line of sight type A. And line of sight type B, my dragon's a bit stuck. Line of sight type B is a little bit more complicated. It's like firstly a horizontal or vertical line and then a diagonal line to the player. So for example, if the mob was here, it would go up here and then diagonally to me. And if this line is interrupted by a solid block, or if this line at any point has 2 solid unhammered blocks to its left and right or up and down or something like that, then line of sight type B is disrupted. The Nebula Floaters, ooh, I died there. The Nebula Floaters will shoot at the player if they have line of sight type A, and if they don't have line of sight type B, then they'll charge at the player. So this is basically a setup to try to get the player to have line of sight, or try to block line of sight type A, but maintain line of sight type B for the Nebula Floaters. It's kind of inconsistent when I'm showing it off here because I'm just literally sitting still shooting downwards, but if you're vigilant, you shouldn't really be getting hit by these Nebula Floaters. You can cheese the Solar Pillar in the same way that you cheese the Nebula Pillar using block clipping. So here I have an isolated spawn again. I can set up a block clip up here, and nothing's going to go after me except for Chlorites, which they nerfed the spawn rates of in 1.4.4. If you don't want to use block clipping, there are also alternate setups for Solar Pillar. So here I have a box set up such that when mobs are at the edges, they won't jump, and this lets my dragon get a bit more damage on them. I'll just build a tower on the left side, such that when I stand on top of the tower, mobs aren't going to spawn because I'm close enough to the floor. And then I'll build a tower of rails up here. And when I hook to these rails, there are going to be mobs spawning because it's just high enough for that to happen. I'll want to place blocks at my feet so that I block off line of sight. You can see that if I don't block off line of sight, Selenians will jump at me and Dracomyres as well. So I want to place blocks at my feet here. And then the only things I really need to deal with are Chorites, which if I'm just only shooting Chorites, then they aren't really hard to take care of. They'll usually try to get above you before they come at you. And you can also get a bit more damage using Phantasm by shooting just a little bit up and right, such that the arrows will fall back down onto the box. It's probably common knowledge by now, but you're able to snipe pillars using a lot of ranged weapons. Guns are particularly good for this because they have no gravity at all, so you can just overlay your map and shoot at the icon, and it'll hit the pillar. The Phantasm is another good bow for this, because it'll tell you if you're hitting an enemy. These regular arrows will spawn a phantom arrow that goes directly towards the pillar if it's hitting an enemy. So if you see these phantom arrows, that means you're on point. Biomimics follow a set behavioral pattern that I'll put up on screen right now, but the gist of it is that you can actually just spawn one like this, and then hammer this tile here, so that they always have line of sight of you, and now I'm completely safe from the biomimic, and I can shoot at it. And I'm also able to use this in my farms. So here, I'd normally be scared of getting a random biomimic to spawn, but if I can set this up here, the only way it can get above me is by jumping through blocks up here and then trying to slam down on me, but because it's going to have line of sight, it won't actually damage me here. There are a few other easy ways to kill biomimics, most notably with lava, since at the point that we will find biomimics, we don't have a good weapon yet. If you don't get close to a biomimic, it won't aggro onto you, and you can just pour lava onto it. Another way you can deal with it is by dropping it into lava. Biomimics will try to match your height, so here, since it's on a platform and I'm below it, it will just drop through the platform into the lava. And finally, since biomimics follow a set behavior pattern, I can actually just place a block like maybe 5 tiles off screen and then spawn a biomimic and aggro it. And then if I go above these tiles, then the biomimic will just keep on trying to jump up to me. And I can set up something so that I can shoot at it. Maybe something like this. Something that you'll notice about Wall of Flesh bridges are that, number one, they're pretty high up, so there's not that much space to move vertically. And number two, they often have these sharp declines or inclines, rather than just these gradual ones over here, which might seem counterintuitive, right? Because Hermes boots could run up these, but not this one. The reason we build the bridge so high up is because we can kind of squish the Wall of Flesh such that all of its eyes and mouth is over here, and we can hit all 3 segments with dynamite, or often just 2 of them. And the reason we do these sharp declines is because it's harder for the Wall of Flesh to see us. Let's suppose there's an eye here. If I built this as a gradual descent, then the eye has perfect line of sight towards me here. But here, with this sharp incline, then the eye is actually just blocked by the bridge. And the eye won't usually shoot at you if it doesn't have line of sight. So you can see in my 1 HP speedrun, I used a lot of doors like this to make sure that the eye wouldn't be able to see me so I wouldn't get lasered. When it comes to the twins fight, Retinazer is definitely the more dangerous twin, and for a couple of reasons. Like, number one, his projectile is just a lot faster, and number two, he's very inaccurate, which makes him very unpredictable. You can see here that I'm literally sitting still and he's missing half of his shots. But there are a couple of ways you can work around this, and it's basically just to manipulate his behavior to not make him shoot at all. So you want to end the dash here really low so that you can ascend with him. When you're around the same height as Retinazer or higher, he won't shoot at all. So here, during his next dash pattern, I'll try to get him to go as low as possible so that I can ascend really slowly and he won't shoot at me. And then the other thing you can do is he won't shoot if you're far enough away. So here he's not shooting at me because I'm far enough away. If you have the Ghost Skull, you can manipulate this really easily. One thing you can do to make the golem fight a lot easier is to build a ceiling that is at least 2 blocks below the actual ceiling. And what this will allow you to do is to maneuver the head into the ceiling so that you're further away from it and makes it easier to dodge. The way you do this is by being kind of high up when you sever the head. When you sever the head, initially it kind of has like no collision check or something like that, and it will just pass right through the ceiling like this. And if you accidentally drag it down or you miss the initial collision check, then it'll get stuck on the ceiling like this, but you can still maneuver it upwards through the ceiling by blocking off its line of sight. The position of the real cultist during this decoy attack is actually not random, it's dependent on where your position is. So here, I'm probably closest to this leftmost cultist. It's determined when he teleports to form the circle. If I'm closest to this leftmost cultist, then the true cultist is on the right, which you can identify by looking at this stripe on his head. If I'm closest to this topmost one, it will also be on the right. But if I'm closest to the right cultist, then the true cultist will be at the top. It will never be at the bottom left here, at least when there's only 3 cultists. I'll put up the exact algorithm for determining this, but just know that you'll only ever be shooting at these 2, and most likely it'll be this one, especially if you're using a lance setup. Something that you might not realize about the Staff of Regrowth is that the game only checks if you're holding the Staff of Regrowth and not if you're using the Staff of Regrowth. What I mean by this is, here I'm holding the Staff of Regrowth and I'll destroy this Moonglow with my hook. And I actually do get the Moonglow seeds. Oh, I just had a stack of them in my inventory so you couldn't tell, but I do get the Moonglow seeds from destroying it with my hook while holding the Staff of Regrowth. And the same goes for these Moonglows that are in planter boxes. I can't destroy them normally with my Staff of Regrowth since they're not fully bloomed, but if I use a door to destroy this Moonglow here, I'll get Moonglow seeds because I'm getting the benefits from the Staff of Regrowth, and the same thing would apply for actuators. Something that you'll see me doing often is crafting bottled honey, even though it seems strictly worse than the greater healing potions here. And the reason for this is because bottled honey is actually bugged. If I press my buff hotkey right now, you'll see that I get 15 seconds of honey, but no potion sickness. So this means that I can use bottled honey along with the buff hotkey to continuously apply honey to myself without having to switch over to a honey bucket. However, if I do consume a potion, then I'll no longer be able to buff up with the bottled honey. Mage weapons in Terraria speedruns are pretty underwhelming because you usually don't have the max mana for it, and you also won't have like magic power potions or mana regeneration potions to supplement them. So a lot of the times we'll actually just rebind our mana potion hotkey to left click, and this allows us to spam things like Ice Rod or Stardust Dragon Staff more easily. The last thing I want to cover is just how I rejoin worlds quickly. A lot of people seem to think it's a macro when it's not, and it's because Terraria has built-in controller keys. So here I'm pressing W and then S, 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 W, 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 W again. All I'm really doing is I'm holding W, lifting up my mouse, and spamming left click. The reason I lift up my mouse is because if I press W and then I move my mouse slightly, then the cursor will teleport back to its original position, so I don't want the cursor to move at all. These are all the strats that I could come up with during my short brainstorming session. I probably missed a ton of them, so if you want to check out Patrick's advanced strat stock, that's going to have a lot of strategies that I didn't include here. Otherwise, I don't know, I hope these strats help you in your casual playthroughs or if you decide to speedrun.